Hey, thanks, Benjamin. My name is Ben Meyer. I'm the lead product manager for Memory Experience, like Benjamin introduced me. Today I'll be sharing my experience with you, what it means to rebuild an app from scratch using React Native. I'll tell you about some of the mistakes we made, so hopefully you don't have to make the same if you're considering taking a similar approach. But before I get started, I'll do a bit more of a thorough introduction on myself, and I'll share some context on Urban Sports Club and what we do for those of you that don't know. So I joined Urban Sports Club around this time last year, in 2019. And before that, I was at Marley Spoon here in Berlin, which is a meal kit subscription service. Reason why I mentioned that is while I was there, I launched a new app for them as well, for their child brand Dinnerly. We didn't build that from scratch, and we didn't use React Native either. But yeah, thought it would be interesting to mention. I have a background in design and development, and transitioned over to product about 5 years ago. And now at Sports Club, I lead a team of 3 product managers, and I'm responsible for the overall member experience, making sure that the entire user journey is coherent. So for those of you who don't know Sports Club, we provide a single membership to a huge variety of sports like yoga, bouldering, tennis. You can go swimming, or you can go to the normal gym, wakeboarding stuff, pretty much anything you can think of. And we have loads of partner venues across the whole of Europe. Yeah, it's a great product. I really love being able to build it. Our vision is to build a world where everybody enjoys doing sports. And that's something that I really like and share, and something I can really get behind. So I'm really happy to be part of the team there. But enough of me and Sports Club. Let's talk about building an app. So to understand some of the decisions we made, I want to give you some context, how it all started and the situation that we were in before we kicked off the project. So we had 2 entirely different apps for Android and iOS. And if you look closely, you can see the Android is dark, and it looks completely different to iOS. It's not just dark mode, light mode. It was actually built by 2 different systems. So the Urban Sports Club was built, the Android app was built by Urban Sports Club a long time ago, and iOS was acquired through an M&A, a merger and acquisition of So Much More in 2016. So we had a whole lot of legacy code on 2 completely different apps with different user experience and UI. The features were completely different. For example, search on Android uses the API, and search on iOS is on device. So the experience and the functionality are completely different. And at the same time, Sports Club just had closed a round B of funding and were expecting to go into hypergrowth. And while that's really exciting, and you get to build the features that you have in the backlog and play around with all crazy ideas, it also means you have to onboard loads of developers to achieve that, which can be really daunting when you have loads of legacy code. So in short, this is what we had, and where we wanted was quite far away. It felt a little bit like this. So we had to do something, and we had to do something quite fast. We came up with 3 options. So refactor what we had, build a hybrid between React Native and native, or restart from scratch using React Native. So refactoring, the idea was mainly to refactor iOS because it had the most legacy code, and then we could keep Android as it was. But that really didn't solve the discrepancy that we had between the 2 in terms of features. Hybrid, we'll go into that as well, and yeah, we are building from scratch. What I'm not going to go into here today is the difference between React Native and Flutter, because I think that's a whole nother discussion. I just want to go into a little bit more detail why we chose to rebuild on React Native. So we made a list with all the pros and cons to evaluate the 3 options. And the first decision that we really had to make was, do we want to rebuild, or is it actually worth refactoring? So I mentioned just then, refactoring like the old code, it seemed like a daunting thing to do. It was really unmaintainable, especially iOS. And there was sort of some doubt as well, really, with, in order to refactor, you have to be quite disciplined. You have to say, okay, every time we build a new feature, we have to take this time that we, like, while building the feature, to refactor as well. And there's sort of some worries that we could have the discipline and not fall back into, we'll fix that later mode. So yeah, rebuilding seemed the better option at this stage. And what we really liked about React Native was the speed of development, having the same code base for both options. It would solve our problem with the feature discrepancy. Like I mentioned earlier, we had big plans of innovation, building loads of features. So we're really interested in the prototyping, A/B testing, like having a component library and setting all of that up from scratch. We really like the idea of code push and getting around updates with Apple, so we could really get down and develop quickly. Also, you don't have to compile code, so iterations are much faster than on native. Performance was one of the things that wasn't that important to us. So often a good reason to go with or to use native is if you have to do many computations. That didn't really apply to us. So React Native seemed just fine. The talent that we had available was really excited about learning React Native. We looked around Berlin, and it looked like we could get some really good developers if we needed to. So that was a good argument for it. And there were some ideas about refactoring the website possibly in React. So we liked that option as well. So overall, we settled on rebuilding from scratch, even though we knew it was going to be risky because you deliver all the value at the end, but it outweighed the benefits of the other options that we had. So we needed a plan, and we needed to do something fast. So we agreed upon rebuilding the functionality of the iOS app because the user experience was better, even though it had more legacy code. Yeah, and only made minor improvements to the design where there was not much UX research needed. So only sort of minor improvements here and there. We made a list and broke down the features, estimated them, and then, because we wanted to maintain the old apps as long as possible as well, we came up with this plan. And if you've ever rebuilt an app, you probably be thinking, yeah, right. It seems ambitious. Well, you're not wrong. But let me explain the plan behind it. So we wanted to, we needed some time to set up the design works, break down the stories from product management side, and then slowly ramp up the capacity on working on the new apps while still maintaining the old apps. And then in the last 2 months, really transition to focusing on React Native. Well, we got going, and then we noticed quite quickly that we weren't going to hit that deadline. So we had to revise the plan, and then we had to revise it again, and then we had to revise it again. And at the end, we ended up with something like this. And there you can see little dips in the middle. That's where we launched in new countries. So we had to maintain that on the old apps as well. But before I go into what really happened and why it took us so long, I want to tell you about one other thing that we did and give you some context where we're now. So something that really helped us get momentum after we started was developing this beta program. We really needed something to look forward to every time we finish a feature, because if you're developing by yourself and you're not releasing, it's nice to actually get this in front of members and get their feedback early. So we came up with a beta program. We invited some people from the office quite early and tested it out with them, and then slowly invited more and more people until at the end we had about 5,000 people join the community, and they were really engaged, and we got loads of feedback, which was really exciting. So did we launch? Is it live? Well, I don't know if you've been on Twitter lately, or if you know hey.com. So hey.com is a new email provider or email subscription app by Basecamp. They had some problems with Apple. They use a subscription service, and Apple rejected them because they don't use in-app payments. Yeah, and Hey is sort of fighting against Apple because for in-app payments you have to give 30% of your revenue for the in-app subscriptions to Apple. But we're in the same position. Apple rejected us because we started offering live class, so digital content in the app as well, on top of the normal sports subscription. And yeah, Apple want us to use in-app payments. So we're fighting. We're still working out, trying to find a compromise. So we haven't launched on iOS, but we released on Android and started the phased rollout last month, and are getting some really nice feedback from people and seeing some good numbers. So that's really encouraging. Cool. So what happened? Why did it take us 18 months to build them or finish a project that we estimated as 5 months at the beginning? And go into a couple of things we faced. So I believe the estimates at the beginning were too optimistic. So rebuilding an app in 5 months is really ambitious. And even if everything goes well, it's quite likely that something will go wrong at some stage. So yeah, it was a very optimistic and ambitious goal. Plus, if you've ever worked with React Native before, you know there's a lot of community maintained libraries that you have to use, and you have to get used to them. We made one mistake to use React Native navigation. That didn't quite work for us. We had to do a lot of customization. So we chose to transition to React navigation instead. That alone took 6 weeks. We had some troubles with the design, some sticky headers that we had to redesign as well. But all in all, all these little differences and complications shouldn't delay a project for that long. So there was something else that happened. And in my opinion, it was this little disclaimer that we had in the original agreement. We said and set the expectations really to rebuild what we have, but we didn't stick to that. We made some huge changes. If you're familiar with Sports Club and you've used the app, you'll know that you have to sign up to a city, and then you can work out in the city that you selected, and have to jump through some crazy UX hoops to select a new city and work out there. We removed all of that, so you can now just swipe around the app and explore the area that you're looking at by a single tap of a button, which is really great user experience, but it completely changed the project that we initially set out to do. And it had huge impact on and knock-on effects. So it really, delayed the whole project. We got a little bit distracted with member feedback. So although the beta was a really good and great success, it's really tempting to listen to the feedback and then jump on tiny bugs that people report instead of focusing on the bigger goal and making sure that you stick to that goal and finish that first before getting stuck in the details. So does it mean it was a failure? I don't think so. Not at all. We achieved everything that we set out to achieve, and more. We've got great user experience. We've got 60% code coverage, maintainable code. We've got all the A/B testing and quick iterations that we wanted. So I'm really happy with the outcome of the project. Looking back, what would I do different, or how would I approach it? So I think rebuilding from scratch can make sense, but it's really risky. And one thing I would definitely change is, if you rebuild from scratch, it's a great opportunity to not only address technical debt, but also design debt. So what I mean by that is, when you're building the first version of your product as a startup, your MVP, you really want to move fast. You want to get things shipped, and therefore you make like a lot of compromises that you then promise to yourself, yeah, I'll clean those up later. And cleaning up later doesn't just mean fixing the code, but you make a lot of UX compromises, right? The system doesn't do it quite the way you want, and it gets really complex, and there's system limitations, etc., etc. So you vow to clean it up, and that never happens. So then at some point you slow down, you're falling behind the competition, and you stopped innovating, others are doing that, and you're watching from the sidelines. So at that point, I believe building from scratch makes sense. But like I said, do a full feature analysis, watch people use your product, because otherwise you might be building something that people don't know how to use, and then you have to rebuild it again as soon as you've launched, and you don't want to waste that time, essentially. So yeah, building from scratch is like building a version 2. It's a great opportunity to clean up and go back to innovating, but it's risky and it's costly. I really think it's a great investment into the future, but you have to set those expectations right from the beginning, I believe, and get everybody on board with that. Because at the end of the day, those are the expectations that you'll be measured against. Thanks. Any questions?
Awesome, thank you.
Thank you so much, Ben. I'll jump first. Could you give a little bit of setting, like team setting? How many developers were you working on this project when you originally estimated it for 5 months, and did it change like until the launch, when you launched, like a year later or 1.5 years later?
Yeah, great question. And sorry that I didn't go into that. So at the beginning, there were 2 developers, one doing Android and one Swift on iOS, but native iOS development. One product manager and one designer. That grew. We onboarded a lot of, well, not a lot, 3 freelancer, because we wanted to move quickly, and then the goal was always to replace the freelancers eventually with full-time employees. We now have, so there was a lot of movement, and then Corona happened, as you all know, so now we have 3 developers working full-time on React Native. And 1 designer, 1 QA, 1 product manager. Team was bigger in the middle, but we sort of had to go back to the reduced capacity.
All right, thank you.
Jens raised his hand.
I guess the 18-month project duration is the time to 100% replacement of the Android app, correct? You did start releasing earlier with smaller app versions, which you improved over time.
So the 18 months was when we were ready to replace the old apps in the App Store. So override the new build, essentially. We released smaller version, but on the beta platform.
But the 18 months make it sound very bad. Actually, you were not that slow.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Sure.
Cool. Christina posted a question to the chat. How did you manage the stage rollout? Did new and returning users get moved over at the same time?
So the staged rollout, that's a feature in the App Store and the Play Store. When you upload a new build, you can say, we want to roll this out to X% on Android. You can choose on iOS on the App Store. That's automatically set for you. So it goes from 1% to 2%, 3, 5, 10, 50, and 100%, I believe. And that just automatically increases the new people. So if anybody downloads the app new, they automatically get the new version. And yeah, everybody else then progressively carries on.
I mean, you also mentioned the beta program, right? Which is a complete separate application.
Exactly. So that required a special invitation. We had a landing page that you could go to Urban Sports Club /beta, and then you could download the app from there and give us feedback and play around.
We also have like a question from Richard. You raised your hand, Richard?
Yep, I'm just writing it because everybody's writing, but okay, but still fine. When you look back now, do you think that if you would have said, yes, we need to refactor the UX as well, it's not only about refactoring or rebuilding code. Do you think you would have gone through this with the stakeholders? And so when you look back, and what do you think would have been the benefits? So do you really think it would have been quicker, less work, less expensive, better quality? What do you think?
Yeah, sure. Honestly, I think if we told our stakeholders right from the beginning, we're going to rebuild this app, we're going to refactor the user experience, figure out how people use the app, and refactor all the code, it's going to take 18 months, nobody would have said yes. It's a crazy project and it's a huge investment, and nobody's willing to really wait that long until possibly they see the benefits at the end. But yeah, up front, that's a big commitment to us. So it is really important to be at that stage if you plan to do that, and say this is we need to do this. It's an investment into the future, and possibly you can get it done quicker than 18 months, and maybe you'll get it past your stakeholders. But I think if we had approached it that way around, just the position that we were in, that yeah, it wouldn't have been agreed to.
So actually, there's nothing you could change for the next project because it's getting a green light for a UX remake is still difficult.
I mean, you could say it like that, yes, but that's something that I would want to change if I did it again. So I would have the knowledge to say, look, we will probably end up doing this anyway, and we will probably end up working on this 12 months anyway. 5 months is not realistic, bearing everything in mind. And if we're going to work on something for 12 months, let's do it right the first time around. Because now we've got some functionality that's refactored and some things that's the legacy. If we'd started from scratch, we would have had a really revamped, completely refactored, state-of-the-art app, and we could have been there quicker than what it took, or the path that we've chosen. That makes sense. But yes, it's risky. It's even more risky than the path that we took, possibly, and you have to be 100% sure that that's what you want to do.
We have also a question from Michelle. Is it a 100% React Native app, or did you have also to add JavaScript native bits for specific features?
So it's written in TypeScript, and then yeah, but it's completely set up through React Native. I mean, there's some baseline native code that you always need, but everything else is React Native, as far as I know. I hope that answers the question.
Cool. So we also have a question from Rohan. What are the bottlenecks with React Native that you see now?
Yeah, I touched on it earlier. There's so many libraries out there that when you choose to pick, like when you have to choose one, you don't necessarily know which one's best. Does this library cover all the functionality that you want? So that can slow you down a little bit while you're trying things out and sort of doing spikes on which one works best. Even though we thought we'd have plenty of talent to choose from, it actually turned out to be quite tricky to hire React Native developers, at least for the budget we had. So that was also another bottleneck in hindsight.
Right. Cool. You got some props from Florian to your teammates. Also a question from Jonas. After having implemented React Native, would you go for it again or rather stay with refactored native apps?
I've asked myself that question. I really want to see the power that React Native has. Right? We haven't launched to all of our members yet. And the setup that we have is really exciting for me as a product manager. We've got this, integrated with Google's Firebase, we've got remote config that we can A/B test stuff on. We could code push features like to a small section of people using the remote config, and then remove it again straight away without the need of any updates, and you wouldn't have any feature flags sort of that you have to release and then update a release to remove them again. So it really offers a great opportunity to do rapid prototyping, and I really want to try it out and get my hands dirty. So if that is what it promises to be, I think it can be a really great, technology to iterate and move fast and stuff if you need that. If you're really put on a lot of emphasis on animations and making things move nicely and smoothly, then maybe native is the better option for you.
And I think we have the last question about, do you think you would have worked faster with a bigger team?
That's always a tricky one, right? Because the more people you onboard, often the more processes you need to make sure that things go quicker. We had the luxury through a lot of the time that we had 3 product managers working on this project and 5 developers. So there was a lot of work up front, planning and talking to stakeholders and etc. like that. So we needed the product power to handle that. So if we had a few more product managers, we would have developers, we would have really been able to go into smaller squads with a product manager each, and then maybe 2 or 3 developers for each product manager. So I think we would have been able to speed up some of the work, at least through phases of the app. But probably not that much.